Hey everyone, welcome to Keto and Crime. Today I'm going to go over what happened on Wednesday, May 22nd in the Chad Daybell case. I'm coming to you Thursday, May 23rd. So yesterday the defense case continued. It was a very short day. They dismissed court in the middle of the day to go over some scheduling. I have a feeling that has to do with the upcoming long holiday, Memorial Day here in the United States. And so I don't think there'll probably won't be any court on Friday or Monday. That's what I'm guessing. And also Pryor indicated he is getting very close to resting. So then we're going to have probably jury instruction after the holiday, jury instruction, and then the defense is done, but prosecution, because of the fact that here in the United States, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. So what Pryor's been trying to do is poke at least one reasonable doubt in each of these charges with his witnesses. Because of that, the state will be allowed rebuttal witnesses to try to put a patch back over those holes. And so we will probably have a few days of state rebuttal witnesses. The defense will have a chance to cross-examine them to re-prick the hole. But so that's what we'll be seeing. Then if jury instruction was not given prior, then that will happen. And then we will hear closing statements from both the prosecution and the defense. And then it will be with the jury. If he is found guilty, we still have probably a week's worth of testimony, because then it will enter the penalty phase, because the death penalty is on the table. So we will hear whether he should live or die, and the jury will again make that determination. So we're far from this being over. I say we probably have another 3 weeks of waiting, possibly even a month before we're actually done. But yesterday was cut short because of that. Also, there was a couple of witnesses that the prosecution originally wanted to call that was not allowed because of the subject of their testimony, and because of certain things that the defense brought to light. Now some of those are back on the table. So basically, Judge Boyce ruled that yes, the prosecution can call this witness now as a rebuttal witness, but Pryor will have the opportunity to cross-examine. And he can also object at the time that any witnesses are called that he disagrees with, and the judge will hear the arguments at that time. So that caused court to be short yesterday. Now, as far as who testified yesterday, the first defense witness called was Patrick Eller. He is the CEO of a company called Metadata Forensics. Basically, this is a company that goes over GPS and cell phone data and geo-tracking. And so he's basically using this to try to refute a lot of the evidence we've heard about the location of Alex, Chad, Lori, their phones, and all of their services. Basically, what Eller does, and you'll find this commonplace in the two experts that Pryor called yesterday, they tend to be giving more of an academic lecture about what they do. Now, I'm a geek. I enjoyed it, but not everybody did. There's a lot of bored-looking people. But basically, this company teaches law enforcement agencies about how to track meta tagging. He talks about things like geofencing and the difference between whether a device is actually there based on the cell pings, or whether they're connecting to a Wi-Fi, which would activate Google. Now, he's talking about how basically all of this, it sounds very convoluted to me, but basically he went over the testimony of all the law enforcement, David Stubbs, Nick Balance, all the law enforcement experts that have already testified about this. And basically he's saying that what they're talking about doesn't hold water, that because whether it was data, the phone was off, it was connected to a Wi-Fi, basically that those estimations can be off by up to 1 to 2 miles. So in his opinion, there's no evidence that Alex was within 1.5 miles of the properties at any of these times, and there was no evidence whatsoever that any of Chad's devices were around at the time. Basically, when Wood cross-examines, he brings up the infamous raccoon text between Chad and Tammy to prove that Chad was on the property at least one of the days, and basically kind of ends it all, in my opinion, by showing that every one of these geofencing that he says is off by a mile or more, that it was still triangulating in the general area of where 𝗙lie was found, of where JJ was found, and that kind of threw Eller off. He's like, he said, basically Wood is saying, isn't it funny that it's exactly off by this radius of these locations? And then he also finished up by saying Alex Cox was Chad Daybell's brother-in-law, and it was on his property, was it not? And Eller had no argument for that. So another mic drop by the prosecution. Pryor then does follow up and basically sums it up by saying, was Chad Daybell's phone pinging all over the place on the day that these people were supposedly buried? And Eller says no, Pryor had nothing further. And then Pryor calls his next witness, Dr. Greg Hamikin. He is a director of the Forensic Justice Project at Boise State University and co-director of the Idaho Innocence Project. Now, they basically work teaching law enforcement about DNA, things like that. He also works with the federal government on a lot of things. He has a federal government grant, although he was pretty plain in saying that the government does not necessarily endorse what he does. And he also works for the Innocence Project, which you've heard me rant and rave about the Innocence Project, how they basically go out of their way and leave no stone unturned to try to get convictions overturned. So it's a nonprofit that carries no water with me. And that, of course, eliminated him as an expert in my mind, because they are almost activists instead of pure scientists, in my opinion. But this guy does seem to be very professional. I enjoyed how he talked about DNA and what he was looking for. He was talking about how what their job is to show either an exact match between DNA and persons or a percentage of a match. Basically, he's talking about the hair specifically that were found on the tape around JJ, that 2 of the hairs matched 𝗚𝗏 perfectly. The others matched no one at all. It didn't match Chad. It didn't match Alex. It didn't match JJ. So he could eliminate those hairs as just being hairs that fly around in the air. And he did talk about how DNA is transferred, that a touch, the wind hitting you just right because you're shedding, or do you have dandruff, all these things, DNA is easily transferred. And so what he does is say this is an exact match. There's a 50-25% chance that it's this person, or there's absolutely no chance at all that it's this person. And that's what he was doing. So basically all that he was talking about is basically that Chad Daybell's DNA was found on tools and things that were turned over to him. So things that Chad Daybell owned, which would be, pretty common, that if you own something, your DNA is going to be on it. But of all the things that he looked at, specifically the tape that was around JJ, that Chad Daybell's DNA was found not on that at all. So he can 100% eliminate Chad Daybell as being part of that. So that was the gist of his testimony. Like I said, the bulk of it, he testified about an hour, and the bulk of it was an academic lecture on the transference of DNA. On the cross-examine, Rob Wood starts out by asking, is his lab accredited to do forensic testing? He says it's an academic lab. They have never applied for forensic accreditation, but they do teach law enforcement officials. He would then ask if he reviewed the reports about the testing on JJ and 𝗙lie's remains. He says yes. He also reviewed the hair that Bode Technology sent to him that matched 𝗚𝗏. And so basically Wood then ends. Wood has nothing else to say. He's basically saying you're not an accredited lab. You only did direct testing on one sample, and you're only specifically talking about the hairs, nothing else. And then Pryor has a brief redirect. He asks about the samples found on the axe and shovel, and Hapkin does confirm that 𝗙lie's DNA was on the axe and shovel, which in my opinion, that's a smoking gun. And he does ask, can you determine how it got on there? And Hamilton kind of goes, well, I can't tell you how DNA gets on anything. DNA transfers very easily, but she had to at least be on the property. So I think Pryor shot himself in the foot with that. And then he's released. And then we go into where they dismiss the public. They turn off the stream. And later on, we find out they were discussing scheduling and then a problem with recall of Detective 𝗂𝗂𝗃 and Deputy 𝗪𝗁, who the prosecution does intend to call as a rebuttal witness. And then that is the ones that Judge Boyce says that the defense can object at the time they're called, and he'll hear those arguments. And then they ask about an additional witness that was not allowed to testify at all, a woman by the name of Janice Olson, Tammy's co-worker, who said she overheard Tammy saying that Chad wanted her to change up her life insurance before she retired. And that was she was not originally allowed to testify because that was hearsay. But because Emma Daybell said that her and her mother changed the life insurance with without consulting their husbands, that door has been opened up. And the judge agreed that now has been opened up as a potential conflict, and now Janice Olson can be called as a rebuttal witness. So I think Pryor did himself a lot of disservice. He may as well have just rested immediately like Lori Vallow did, because I think he's only made it worse. I don't think he's erased any doubt. The only doubt that could be erased if somebody believes some of these far-fetched theories about the DNA and the GPS tracking, or if they found either of Chad's children credible. So but like I said, it only takes a pinhole in any of the charges for a not guilty. So we'll see. The defense is going to, I think the defense will rest today. I think we'll probably be in recess through the long holiday. And I think the rebuttal witnesses will be called next week. So that's what we're looking at. Could be totally wrong in that. That's my opinion. But I will be back with you on Friday, the 24th, to go over what happened today, Thursday, May 23rd, in the Chad Daybell case. And until next time, keep it.